I'll initiate a countdown and post that when I give a go ahead. I mean, you can pause and you can proceed.
Few seconds, yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome to this edition of the Times Techies webinar. I'm Shilpa Fadnis and I have with me my colleague Sujit John. The two of us will moderate today's discussion. I hope you and your families are doing well and staying safe. Our discussion today is on free and open source software in India. In proprietary software, you need to pay a license fee to the owner of that software if you want to use it. In contrast, in free and open source software, anyone is free to edit, copy, and change the software in a way that they want to. The source code of the software is openly shared so that people are encouraged to voluntarily improve and design the software. Successful software of this kind will often have large communities working on them, improving them. For India, such software in public projects particularly can be financially beneficial because you don't have to pay huge license fees, which is why we have government promoting FOSS in a big way. To discuss the FOSS movement, we have 3 seasoned professionals, all of us who are active in the space. We have with us Kailash Nadh. Kailash is CTO of Zerodha. He has a PhD in AI and computational linguistics from Middlesex University. He's been the CTO at Zerodha since 2013, where he co-founded its tech arm. Zerodha is now the largest stockbroker and one of the largest fintech companies in India. Kailash has been a hobby software developer for close to 2 decades and writes code every day. He's the co-founder of FOSS United Foundation, a non-profit that promotes the open source software ecosystem in India. Welcome, Kailash.
Thank you.
We have with us Rushabh Mehta. Rushabh joined his family business of manufacturing hospital furniture after his MS degree in 2004. A few years into it, the firm was implementing an ERP solution from a vendor and was facing some integration issues. Rushabh was a hobbyist programmer and decided to create an ERP tool himself to solve some pain points. In 2008, he founded Frappe Technologies in Mumbai. Frappe is better known by his product name ERPNext. Today, he's working to build a high-quality, free and open source ERP. Welcome, Rushabh.
Thanks for having me here.
And we have Vinay Yadav. Vinay co-founded Webkul 12 years ago to work on open source projects. Today, Webkul is one of the largest open source contributors from India and has released world-class open source projects, including Bagisto, QLO, UV Desk, and Crane CRM. Webkul is also an official contributor to various open source projects, including Magento, OpenCart, Odoo, and PrestaShop. Welcome, Vinay.
Thanks, Sujit.
Those who are viewing this can send in questions through the Facebook comment box. Shilpa and I will put them to Kailash, Rushabh, and Vinay. Let me first start by asking all of you, tell us a little about the FOSS movement in India. You're told that we have a large community of open source contributors in India, but not enough locally done projects in India. Kailash and Rushabh, you started the FOSS United platform. So give us an idea, how is that doing? How large is the open source community in India? Kailash, you want to start?
Yeah, I can go. FOSS United Foundation is just about 1.5 years old. And it started out really when our views and our activities at Zerodha and Frappe, between me and Rushabh and our teams kind of aligned. And we shared the view that despite, like you said, despite the existence of a massive developer pool in India, very little open source projects originate in India. And it's a bit of a mystery. We don't really know why. Maybe the way the industry is set up, academia is set up, cultural aspects, we don't really know, but we figured that we should we should try and build a platform that tries to solve some of these pain points that we have as open source developers, FOSS developers ourselves. So the idea of FOSS United is to firstly build a community around it with a formal organization. Most FOSS movements in India have largely been volunteer driven. FOSS United is also to a large extent. And many of them have fizzled out as people have moved on to non-volunteering things like life and careers. So we want to give this a formal structure, and we also want to attempt to bridge the gap between the tech industry and the FOSS community, which is something that we feel no other organization has attempted. To explain that a bit, all the big tech companies of today, that have sprung up over the last 5-10 years, including companies like Zerodha, or successful companies, well-known companies, consumer apps, huge valuations. These are all largely built on top of open source software. So one would think that with such a thriving tech industry, there should be projects that originate, well-known FOSS projects, big enough projects that originate. That doesn't happen. And there's still a clear divide between industry and the FOSS community of independent FOSS developers. There's still that, us versus them thing. So we want to attempt to, as people who are developers ourselves and as people from the industry, we want to try and bridge that gap somehow and enable participation from both sides to see if that at least makes a dent to the landscape that we're talking about. So we're seeing community interest over the last year and a half. I mean, it's a very new organization, FOSS United. We're also seeing industry interest. We ran a large FOSS hackathon last year online, and we got 10 tech companies to fund the prize pool that straight out went into FOSS projects. So we're experimenting, and we're seeing interest from both sides, and we are hopeful as FOSS developers. Yeah.
You're hoping that industry will support you more in some sense, is it?
We are hoping that the industry will take an active role in participating with the FOSS community of individual developers. And we're hoping that it'll be in the form of monetary support for FOSS projects. It'll be in the form of community participation by contributing code to upstream projects. In the end, we want to see more and more high quality FOSS projects originate from India, with active participation from the industry that consumes it heavily, and from the developers who contribute to projects the world over.
Okay. Rushabh, Vinay, you want to add to that? Rushabh,
Yeah.
What is your experience with ERPNext and all that? I mean, and the community at large?
Yeah, so ERPNext, when we started this project in 2008, there was like very little FOSS community in India, and there was very, very few places where you could showcase yourself as a FOSS project or even engage with users or get some kind of visibility. And this was something we experienced ourselves. And as we became stronger and we found a good partner in Zerodha, I think this is a gap we identified that okay, this needs to be filled. I mean, if you look at the whole technology industry, essentially people learn through FOSS. I mean, FOSS is not only that you have free software, but a lot of best practices, a lot of technology proliferation actually happens through FOSS because these tools are easily available. You don't need to sign up and get a license. I started my career building on Microsoft technologies, and one day I discovered Python, and I realized like this is free and this is better. I mean, why should anybody use Microsoft for the kind of projects? And it became apparent to me 12-15 years ago that if you have to write software that is going to last longer, it has to be free and open source. And this movement has just exploded in the last 3 or 4 years to an incredible level, because now you've seen so many companies, engineers themselves have become a huge market, which is, the acquisition of GitHub by Microsoft was like a really watershed moment where, and Red Hat, which got acquired for $30+ billion. So huge investments going into free and open source software, because essentially all software is distributed through this channel now. There is no long, I mean, the proprietary software channel is slowly reducing, even though it's still bigger than the open source industry. But the other thing is you don't always capture the value, right? Like Linux would have created $1 trillion economy, right? Which you don't realize because there is no $1 trillion company Linux, which is listed somewhere, and people say, okay, like it would have been $1 trillion company, right? If you capture the value that Linux has created for all of us. And there is that kind of a mindset also that a rebellion that you don't like, you want to be independent, you don't want to go through the traditional channels, because this is very meritocratic, unlike other brutally meritocratic, unlike other proprietary channels that if your software is good, only then people are going to take it, and that also becomes the entry point. So it's multiple factors coming together that make this whole ecosystem work in that sense. And in India, we are very, very early days compared to, I mean, even though we have the second highest number of software engineers globally, I mean, we have, I would say, less than 5% of, like maybe less than 3% of the FOSS open source activity that's happening in India. So, and then if we have to really build India as an economy of like a good engineering innovation driven environment, all the innovation happens because it is freely shared. And so a lot of reasons for FOSS United.
Okay, we'll come to that a little later. But yeah, interesting thought. I hadn't thought about it. Linux, $1 trillion. Yeah, potentially. Yeah, it could have been. And that's a value more it would have delivered. Vinay, tell me, I mean, you have multiple projects going on open source. You have 500 employees. You made a successful business out of the whole FOSS project. I mean, so tell us how you did it.
So basically, I think one very big mistake FOSS company do, they try to sell the philosophy more than the product. So what I think that FOSS is a business model, and right now FOSS has the values. So we should sell the values, and we should, well, philosophy will conquer, philosophy will overcome at the end. But the business will look for the value. When you are able to meet any investors or any big decision maker in enterprise, and you are trying to convince based on the philosophy, it will not work. You need to show the value. And right now FOSS has a very, very big value, especially for the bigger enterprise, because FOSS provide you the complete control over the software, which proprietary or the SaaS based software does not provide that. So the complete value, because the every country is putting restriction on the data. So if you are using any proprietary software or SaaS software, there is a possibility that you do not have control over the data. So it is a completely right time, and it is happening right now. The enterprise is moving toward, or I'm saying rushing toward the open source software and open source alternatives, because they cannot compile with the law if they do not have control over their data. So FOSS by the nature, it is a right time, because it means for big enterprise, it is not possible to control their data or control the ownership over the software if it is not FOSS. So I think we should talk about the philosophy, but when we are selling, we should talk about the values, because the now values is bigger than the philosophy. The second point I want to add, that we should focus to introducing FOSS into the colleges. We must, means it should be the part of curriculum that engineer should complete in their 4 year of curriculum. They must become the collaborator in some big FOSS project. So because this will work as a good internship, and they will understand the FOSS development methodology and all of this thing. So I think if we work on these two directions, we work on the colleges to use FOSS, and we should start selling the value instead of philosophy.
Right now, there's not much that is taught in colleges on FOSS.
No, right now means everyone is using FOSS, because in backend softwares, in the development platform, the proprietary system is almost completely thrown away by the FOSS. So everyone is using FOSS. It is not possible to develop anything without using FOSS. But the developer or the candidates in the college are not using the FOSS as a development method. They are not very much doing collaboration or doing participation into the FOSS project. So they are using it, but they are not providing, means they are not becoming the collaboration, and they are not doing they are not giving back to the project.
Got it.
So
got it. Shilpa?
Yeah, Kailash, coming to you, there are several public services that are leveraging FOSS as the building block, be it Aadhaar, your GST and DigiLocker. So if you can help us understand how you can have more Atmanirbhar into the FOSS ecosystem in India.
Like Rushabh mentioned, and like Vinay just said, so the word Atmanirbhar is really self-sustenance, right? And the fundamental problem with proprietary software is that it's somebody else's. You rent proprietary software, and whenever terms change, whenever companies change, whenever the winds of business shift, you are the rug is pulled out under the rug is pulled out from under your feet. So in any sense, if you, as a business or anybody who uses software, if you want to have the liberty, the peace of mind of being self-sustaining with a piece of software, you should own it. Now, of course, not everybody can build software from scratch. That requires great technical capacity. But there is free and open source software. If you want to run, let's say, if you use Firefox as a browser, that copy of Firefox that you have, it's yours to use, change, edit, whatever. No company can suddenly come take your browser away from you or your operating system, say Linux. So merely by using free and open source software, even if you do not contribute, even if you don't really understand the philosophies, simply using free and open source software instead of rent-seeking alternatives will make you Atmanirbhar. Now, on a national level, if public services, if critical services are all built on somebody else's proprietary platform to which you have to pay huge amounts to for maintenance, that's not really being self-sustaining. You are at somebody else's mercy. They can increase prices, they can do whatever. But if you adopt open source software and build these blocks in-house, build some technical capacity and self-host, then you are truly Atmanirbhar. And this also has the other really good benefit of creating a local technology ecosystem. If you want to self-host software, you need people who know how to do it. Now, doing this at a national scale should naturally create a community of developers who work on these projects, build a whole ecosystem of technology, of developers and technology workers who participate in these projects. So the benefits of governments adopting FOSS is just manifold. Yeah.
Okay, I'll come back to that again. But again, Rushabh and Vinay, I mean, both of you started off with open source projects. What gave you the courage to do? I mean, generally it's being said that financially you might not be very, I mean, for at least some years it might be difficult and all of that. Rushabh, I think you had a family business to back you up, I guess. But what else did you give you the courage to go ahead with this?
Like I said, when I first discovered Python as a programming language, it was free and better. And I mean, it just made sense to me that, this is the future, right? I mean, you can't, in the long run, free will win. That was very clear to me. And yeah, why would you do proprietary software? I mean, that was my thought if you especially want to build a software product. And probably for me, the philosophy also was important. Maybe I have certain leftist leanings through my childhood and early growing up years. So this whole idea of let's give it away for free and let's create this kind of a movement. I to be honest, that was also part of the decision for me. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, okay. Vinay, how long did it take you to come into revenues and all of that?
Actually,
wasn't that a struggle?
To be very honest, Webkul, from starting, it's a bootstrap company, and we started with a very right mindset, with the very unit economy mindset. So we are profitable very early, within few months. And the profitable means we just need to sustain ourselves. We are not looking for, we very much believe that the first value, then the valuation. So we are not looking for having to generate a big amount of profit or putting lots of cash burn. So for us, it was very obvious that we are going to use FOSS, and we started as a enhancing FOSS by developing plugin on top of it. So if the FOSS is not there, we cannot do the same with the bigger proprietary software, because their systems are very much closed. And even for using it, you need lots of license and lots of other things. So the Webkul will not possible if FOSS is not there. So during our college time, I and the other co-founder, we are roommate in our college. So during the whole college life, we used to contribute with the FOSS projects, and we used to involve into the FOSS, all the FOSS activities, and so everything we did inside the FOSS. So for us, Webkul exists because FOSS was there. So if FOSS was not there, then Webkul will not exist. So So for us, it is not any. There's no other choice.
So you became profitable very quickly, is it?
Yeah, because it's like we started with a both mindset. We start developing plugin and start putting on these platforms, marketplaces, and we start getting customers from there from very beginning. So we are profitable. We are sustainable. Means we are able to
So
feed
even for
ourselves
those
very well.
plugins and all that, even for those plugins and all that, you were earning revenue.
Yeah. So I want to clarify the fact. Means the philosophy is very important for the FOSS, without any doubt. Means FOSS started with the philosophy, but in the philosophy is the free means freedom. It's not means the free in the price, and that's what we need to project. That the free means the freedom. That you have freedom, you have the ownership, you have a control. It's a that's free is there. Free is not means that you should get it free of the cost. Okay, that's a it's a part of the 90% costs are free of the cost, and that's okay. There is not problem with that. But we need, even when we are selling it, means what I mentioned earlier, that philosophy is important, and it's important for the community. But when we are selling to the enterprise, the first we should talk about the value. And right now we are giving the bigger value. Even I personally believe that the FOSS should be, in price terms, should be more than the proprietary, because proprietary is giving you less. We are giving you the same software, same features, and the source code. So we are giving you more, and the proprietary is giving you less. So ideally we should charge more, but okay, that's okay that we should charge like a normal thing, that we should charge only the profitable whatever thing. But ideally the fight should not be on the price, because we are giving the more value.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Okay. And the government is now supporting this in a big way, is it? Kailash, or have you been, any of you been called by the government to help them or anything like that?
Not really, not directly, no. But we hope.
Not you.
Yeah, we hope to communicate via FOSS United, representing community and industry. We hope to. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have been invited several times by various government, and I have a whole bunch of stories here where how everything ultimately gets stuck in procurement.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Is that so? ERPNext is getting a lot of traction, and I think there are a lot of evangelists within Government of India who are pushing for ERPNext through NIC and a lot of other. At various levels, government itself is 1,000 plus different bodies, right? I mean, there is no government as such, right? I mean, it's the dairy board, or it's the Indian Army, or it's Bharat Electrical Limited or whatever, right? I mean, we've been like talking to a bunch of people, and it always boils down to procurement, because it always boils down to tendering. We have done. We work with Government of Maharashtra. I work with Municipal Corporation of Mumbai, and also done one smart city project in Bihar Sharif, so that uses ERPNext Bihar Sharif smart city, and there we are, a sub vendor to a sub vendor, right? I mean, that is how government procurement works, and there is definitely growing interest. There is a lot of awareness. There is a lot of evangelism inside the government to push open source. But when the road hits the rubber, I mean, there is a lot of procurement and other things that still need to be figured out. I think to make FOSS happen, the middle tier, right, which is the system integrators, I mean, they have to really adopt FOSS, and they have to start supporting FOSS, because they have the know-how of how to close these tenders, right? And as FOSS developers and as engineering focused companies, we would be very hard for direct engineers or FOSS communities to work with government, and it has to be through some system integrators.
Okay.
Yeah. And that ecosystem is still maturing. Still early days there.
Vinay, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. So on policy level, government is very much active. I have seen lots of policies coming on the FOSS and for the open source. And to be very honest, even government recognizing FOSS term and writing a separate policy for it and having a different website for it, it's a good thing. It's a very positive changes. So government has complete dedicated policy. I think around 2015 or somewhere they put a complete dedicated policy, and according to policy they preferred open source and the FOSS project for the tender. I knew on the ground level it may have a different experience. We still didn't work with government for any tender kind of project, so we did not have some kind of this kind of experience. But I very much agree that on practical ground there may be some problem. But on the top level, on the policy level, I have seen a very positive initiative. Even right now, some challenges, open source challenges going around, and so. But many times I see it's a kind of mandatory condition in the tender that your software, you must provide the complete source code of the software. So by this line, many proprietary software is automatically out of the tender. So I think the things are moving faster. It will definitely seen on the ground too.
Okay. Shilpa, I just wanted to ask Rushabh one question on this. You mentioned system integrators. So are you talking to the Infosys, Wipros and all that, whoever is doing India projects and stuff?
Yeah, they are talking to us because, like Vinay said, there are these tender conditions that are beginning to appear that, the source code has to be available. So some of these system integrators are talking to us. But again, this is a lot of it has to be with experience. So if you're implementing a large project, if they have never worked with a piece of software before, there is still a lot of hesitancy. So we are early days, and we see a lot of interest from system integrators to work. But in terms of what is actually converted, it's very little. I mean, those projects have converted. I mean, the ratio is still quite small, but the interest keeps on increasing every day.
Okay, may take some time. Shilpa?
Yeah, we have some questions coming in. This is from Kenneth Sequeira. Where do our speakers think the future of FOSS lies and the mega value it creates? It is more on the developer tool side, Linux languages tooling, or on direct applications to consumers, VLC, Firefox. Historically, the bigger tide is seen on the back end. Is there a similar value creation on the direct consumer end waiting?
I would say FOSS as the future is already here. I mean, we're already in the thick of it. FOSS started out as a hobbyist moment in deeply technical hobbyist communities. So naturally, most of the FOSS software, most FOSS was focused within these, so-called back-end engineering productivity tools. But that boat sailed a long time ago. Today, things like VLC, Firefox, Chromium, but these are all consumer software used by hundreds of millions of people, and they're all open source. And pretty much every single consumer app that we use today, even if they're proprietary, is probably 90% built on FOSS. So it's already here. We'd only see the proliferation of bigger and bigger and more directly accessible consumer software, without a doubt. We are already in the future. Yeah.
Rushabh, you want to add to that?
Rushabh, you are muted, huh?
Yeah. No, I mean, we are still like Kailash said, no, you have, the browsers are already free and open source, and a lot of the other tools, whether we are directly in, but the consumer side has still not been one, and the big block in my view is the user experience, because FOSS is primarily built by developers for developers, and that's where it ends usually. But when you look at consumer products, I think the user experience has to be for a non-technical person. And I think most FOSS projects are yet to make that jump. Essentially, I also feel that a lot of engineering architecture, the way it is structured today, the way software is developed is very tooling heavy, right? Where there is like insane amount of tooling that goes on to make one piece of software. And most of people are still, like most of the FOSS is the tooling currently. And as the industry evolves, I think as we have better tools, there is a whole new segment of low code tools, where now non-technical people are beginning to build products, or, there is a push for these products where, more and more people now can create software. And this is where I think the edge is, and the clear gap for me in FOSS is user experience. And that's what
Clear gap is user experience, you're saying, is it?
Yeah, for example, I mean, if you look at Ubuntu, that Linux desktop, right, which has been around for such a long time, I think there is still some polish that other proprietary tools are giving, which not able to give. And even if you look at Android, right, I mean, essentially, yeah. So that's still.
What is the reason for that, you think?
Again, because the people so the people who write FOSS are writing it for themselves, right? That is the primary motivation. It's not really for somebody else. I don't care about somebody else's problem, because I write because I'm passionate. I have a problem to solve. I fix it. That's the first. That's like why most of the FOSS gets created. It's not really for making money. the making money part. So to make money, you have to do something for somebody else. And that kind of thinking is just beginning to come in the FOSS ecosystem, I feel, where, if I'm if I'm an engineer, if I understand it, that's good enough for me. I don't care if somebody who is a non-engineer understands it.
Okay.
So that is also the opportunity for FOSS to really, because there is, and the other thing is services, right? This is the other big challenge I'm seeing, is that the future of software consumption is no longer software as it was packaged maybe even 10, 15 years ago. We are using basically everything off some cloud, right? Whether it is Zoom or it is Facebook, or like most of the software we are using is essentially network software, because there are multiple people networked on a software application, and it is consumed as a service. So if you say the most successful FOSS service in that case is Wikipedia, and that's another $1 trillion product right there, Wikipedia, right? I mean, if you can put a number to how much value Wikipedia creates for all of us. So there is a huge opportunity there to create services that are FOSS, which are community run and completely open source. Say a completely open source social network, a completely open source search engine for that matter. I mean, these are all frontiers that are out there for people to attack.
Okay. Vinay, I just want to ask, I mean, there's otherwise a lot of interest in entrepreneurship, even amongst our youngsters. But FOSS is not an area, like all of you said, not enough projects emerging out of India, not enough startups focused on FOSS. What is your advice to youngsters and anybody looking to start an enterprise? And I have a similar question also from Smriti Mishra asking, what advice would you give to startups looking to build their product on FOSS?
The first advice is they should 100% go for the FOSS. If you are building some product, like Zerodha is the biggest example. Zerodha is such a great story, and if they can build everything on the FOSS, and if they can have such kind of big scale, big transaction, and having a very lean team on the tech ground, and they are able to do it. So I think Zerodha is itself an answer for this question. So the one thing, if you are building your startup, you should not have any doubt that you should use FOSS, means almost 100%. The second thing, offering FOSS services. These are two different things. Like means the offering FOSS services. In this case, you need to be a little bit practical. Means the first one thing is 100% sure, as Kailash mentioned, that we are in the future, and everyone is going to use FOSS, especially in the B2B segment, enterprise segment. Eventually, everyone will use FOSS because they have no other options. Means when the government will push for the data, when the government will push for these kind of things, they have no other option to have a FOSS system, so that they can manage this thing. Means for the big enterprise. For the small like of SMEs or very small business men, I think in that case SaaS will be the very big competitor. Like for the e-commerce, if some big enterprise want to have e-commerce site, they are going for some open source like Magento, PrestaShop, Odoo, or whatever. This kind of platform. But if some very small mom and pop shop try to have e-commerce, they will go for the Shopify. So they need to understand who is your customer and from where you are, means who is you are targeting. So a small enterprise earlier, means almost 4 to 5 years back, SME sector was covered by the FOSS, and enterprise avoided. But now this FOSS is traveling, and they are going to the enterprise, and SMEs are going for the SaaS offering like Zoho, Shopify, and Zoho, Shopify. All of them is doing very, very brilliant. There's no problem with that. But definitely at the end, after 5 years or 6 years, we will see that enterprise is not using the SaaS software; they are using the FOSS very well. So if you are going to provide FOSS services or FOSS product, you need to target well. You need to have your understanding very practical. Means your expectations should be practical. Means definitely right now, if you're trying to get funding out of FOSS, it's tough. It will change. Eventually, it will change when money for wealth will come. Eventually, it will change. But right now, if you're trying to get funding out of FOSS, it will tough. And if you are a very young company, very small company, and FOSS grow with time. Means if you're building a FOSS, you will build a small product. So if you're targeting enterprise, you cannot directly target enterprise. And if you're targeting a small player, they may have option like Shopify and SaaS players. So you need to understand the market and you need to segment like this.
Who are your customers, Vinay?
So our customer is from the entrepreneur to the big enterprise. Everyone is in the domain, because we work on the more than 10 platform, and we believe that customer is everywhere, and we should serve customer wherever they are. So we have OpenCart, PrestaShop, WooCommerce as a platform which basically serve SMEs, and we also have Magento and these kind of platform which serve enterprise. And we also we are very FOSS supporter, but we also build on top of Shopify, because there are lots of customer on the Shopify. So we want to help the merchant. So we must have our values and vision are clear, that we should not rigid, okay, we are going to help only if you are on the FOSS. So we are building lots of plugin on the Shopify. And even for the very small merchant, if they come to us, we recommend them to Shopify. Because if they just want to try the idea and they have a very limited budget, they should do on the Shopify. These are recommendations for the small. But when the enterprise come to us, we say, no, you should go for some open source, because it will give you control and it will give you ownership and everything. So this is how we project ourselves.
Okay. Shilpa?
Yeah, we have this question from Samshvi Holi. Why don't Google provide the best services as a single base point for all MSMEs, public needs, customized softwares?
I think it will not be a good future. If a single company provide everything, it will not be a good future.
I don't think it's...
Yeah.
Sorry, please.
Yeah. So that's the beauty of FOSS, that it breaks monopoly. It's very tough to build monopoly when you have a FOSS alternative, like it happened with the Windows. I mean, if you are going to with the history and all the war, like the OS war is win by FOSS. The browser war is win by FOSS. The mobile OS war, I will say it will by FOSS. So it breaks lots of monopoly. So on OS, Windows does not have monopoly due to the FOSS, due to the Linux. So it will not be a good future that Google is going to provide everything. And it will not be happening. The world is full of good people.
And I think that question, it's not really about FOSS. That's like asking, why doesn't a big bank offer, I know, food delivery? Because they have resources and access to, people. It's also about focus and forte, right? Just because you're a software company does not mean that you're good at building all sorts of software. Google's good at certain things. Somebody else is good at some certain other things. So it's basically that forte.
Okay. There is this question, not precisely FOSS, but this is from Sushma Kumar asking, I'm a second-year degree student who stepped into BSc in computer science. I need to know if getting into cloud computing or game development in MCA after my BSc, would that be a good idea? She's also asking, what is the common path taken by all software development engineers to start up anything at all?
I have no idea.
Okay.
But you don't become a good software engineer by taking certain degrees. You become a good software engineer by writing software and gaining experience. You can not really get any of these degrees, but learn programming and build software, build, break, gain experience via trial and error, and you can become a good engineer. I would say every good engineer out there, every good software developer out there, that's how they become good software developers, not really by going through certain academic courses. So there are no shortcuts. If you want to start some tech venture, if you want to be a software entrepreneur, you have to first become a software developer. And for that, you have to write a lot of software and gain that experience, irrespective of your academic path.
And what GitHub would be one of the best places to do that?
No, GitHub is just a tool. It's just a platform that aids in discovery of code.
Okay.
But it's just search. I mean, how do you learn something, right? You literally search. You go on Wikipedia and learn about a topic. Similarly, if you want to, let's say, learn how to write Python software, you literally Google how to learn Python. There's an infinite amount of resources that will teach you pretty much everything there is to know about all sorts of software engineering. So you get started somewhere. And once your vision of the software landscape solidifies, you'll know where to explore. But you have to start somewhere. And of course, academic institutions may give you a head start by introducing you to, let's say, Python programming. There could be a course. But for one to become a good developer, they have to write a lot of code and learn all of it themselves.
Writing that code, where do you do that writing that code? For yourself or participating in these open source projects?
You have to start writing it yourself so that you learn. And once you're mature enough to contribute, you can contribute. But without knowing how to program well, it's difficult to contribute to other projects. So you'd be writing it yourself, solving small little problems, reading up tutorials, just using the search engine to discover and learn. And there are tons of structured courses online available today also that will just, give you a proper milestone-based delivery of programming experience. But you still have to write it yourself and learn it yourself.
Vinay, you want to say something?
No, Kailash is covered it very well. Then you need to write first, you need to write. And then, definitely then the next step is join GitHub and try to become collaborator in any of the project in your field. Like if you want to game developer, go and join Unity 3D kind of repo and try to become the collaborator. Then you will learn lots of things. But first, before becoming the collaborator, you need to learn by yourself and by other courses.
Okay. Shilpa?
Yeah, we have this question from Prachi Chauhan. What role do you think big IT companies like TCS and FOSS can play in promoting open source in India? Rushabh, do you want to take that?
Rushabh mentioned that partly work with companies like his. Apart from that, what else?
No, these big, these big companies are essentially followers, right? I mean, they don't, there is a client who takes these calls, and if the customer is the government and the government says we want FOSS, that's what they're going to do. I think within them, we had a chance to talk to one of the big IT companies in Bangalore, and this is like maybe a couple of years ago, and they said that anything if the impact is less than $1 million, we are not even interested about talking to you guys. And what I feel is I was talking to somebody else who worked in one of these companies, that the Indian IT service industry has been sleeping through this entire products revolution, right? Right India under their noses. And then this guy told me, like, it's a good thing, because if they would have invested in those companies, they would have destroyed them. So yeah, I mean, these are extremely sales driven companies, few large customers driving most of the revenue. So extremely sales customer driven companies. I think they have, I mean, if anybody, I don't think anybody is listening to this from these companies, and if they are, then, I mean, they have such huge balance sheets, right? I mean, they just need to put some money aside for experimentation and push things forward. But I don't think anybody is listening. So,
but they have their own open source teams and all that, no?
Yeah, I have experience with working with TCS on open source projects. Even we work with Happiest Mind, Mindtree. So because I said the movement is happening, the enterprise is using open source. So now they are pushing. So TCS and other this kind of big MNCs, which earlier only work on the proprietary software because they make a whole company out of it. But now they are forced, or they are also making some choices. So they all have an open source department, and TCS even do multiple projects with us. They buy all multiple products. We have a long-term relationship with Happiest Mind and the Mindtree. So both of them work with. Even Happiest Mind acquired an open source based company in Noida. I'm just maybe not recalling the name correctly, but it is OSS Cube, if I'm correct. So they only work on the open source. The OSS Cube company was only work on the open source. So right now, no one can avoid open source. That was my point. That no one can avoid open source. So if you want to exist, you need to follow open source. You cannot avoid it, especially the company like TCS and all this, because enterprise is going to use open source and they need to change their model.
I'd like to quickly add, I think the difference here is consumption versus production. Yeah. And production of open source software has a greater impact on the proliferation of open source software and the strengthening of the community than just consumption. Of course, consuming and becoming users of FOSS does help FOSS, but large companies with a lot of resources should also kind of look at the philosophy of generating FOSS. If they just consume and build value and make money, that's fine. But for them to really aid FOSS in India, they should produce FOSS, or at least publicly fund and support FOSS outfits to generate FOSS. So it's the
They're
difference.
not doing that at all.
I don't think so. Even if there is anything, it's not something that has been on anyone's radar. It must be that minuscule.
Really, yeah, that's strange, because some of the global software companies and all make a big noise about the amount of support they are giving for.
Oh, absolutely. Be it Microsoft, Google, Facebook, all of these companies produce immense amounts of open source software. And on top of just generating software, it's also a form of branding. If nothing, it's a form of amazing branding and loyalty building. So even from a purely selfish commercial perspective, just supporting open source and generating software automatically becomes a part of building community support and getting really good branding outreach.
Okay, FOSS United should push for that, Kailash.
We aim to bridge that gap, but it's an attempt. Yeah.
Shilpa?
Yeah, we have this question. I don't know if it's related. Kalyani Vanamala, how can a person get into gaming after UG in AI ML? And is there any specific skills to get into gaming?
Honestly, I have no idea. Just learn to code and then discover your path. You can't just get into gaming after UG or PG. UG, PG, none of those things have any have any bearing on gaming or software. If you want to get into software, learn how to code, practice, and become a developer. Yeah, that's what I have to say. Sorry.
We had a lead story today on gaming. Maybe that's what got me to ask this question.
See, this is one of those issues that we have, right? It's very, it's like that dangling carrot thing. And if let's say FOSS becomes a part of the curriculum across academia, I have a feeling it might become one of those checkboxes, just do those checkboxes, make a contribution. But that's not really how you get into FOSS. You have to understand the philosophy and understand its utility, rather than saying, oh, FOSS is cool, let me just get into that. Or my course requires me to, fill a certain checkbox. But yes, academia would be the right place to inculcate the right kind of ideas. Like when I said, if they kind of instill the philosophy and the usefulness and utility of FOSS as a part of the curriculum, rather than saying you need to go contribute, if you try and attempt the right way, maybe some of these questions that we are getting wouldn't arise, because people would have much better clarity on what all are involved.
Okay.
I just have an analogy that I keep using in this context is that, people have seen this Indian Idol, right? Where in the auditions, right, everybody comes and they think they can sing, right? And then they just come. But finally, the people who get selected are the ones who have practiced, right? I mean, it's the same with coding, right? I mean, it's if you go in a job interview and you think you can start, singing right at the interview, you're going to fail miserably. So any student who is watching, just practice. It is like that. The number of hours you practice, the better you will get in this industry. So nothing other than practice.
Yep.
Okay. China is also big in FOSS, is it? They're also doing these big projects.
Huge. I've as a developer who's been, who keeps a track of certain, ecosystems within the FOSS community, I've seen an exponential rise in great quality open source projects coming out of China, maybe in the last 5 years. Or beyond 5 years, 10 years ago, you would barely see a project that came from China. But today, in certain ecosystems, a huge number of projects are just from China. So there's a huge uptick in Chinese developers producing high quality open source software that are used globally and accepted and recognized globally, all coming out of China. Yeah.
What changed the tide, you think?
I'm not really sure. I mean, it's a bit of a black box, but I would just think that the community there really picked up, the industry picked up. There's this huge proliferation of massive Chinese IT companies, tech companies, and a lot of these keystone projects that really kicked off Chinese influence in the open source software world. Their name came out of some of these really big companies. The industry produced some really big keystone open source projects, and then the rest just followed. And here, I'd say apart from ERPNext, I don't really know of any big, industry open source projects. So I have a feeling once the industry kickstarts some of these big projects, be it the big IT services companies or be it tech companies, the community will follow. And of course, that has a snowball effect. Once you build a big FOSS community, they'll automatically start producing FOSS.
Okay. Shilpa?
Yeah, a lot of questions.
Lot of questions coming. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
You guys have really drawn a lot of interest.
Interest,
So
yeah.
maybe it's something we are in the, I think, on the threshold of some big open source growth, I think.
We can hope that this is the watershed moment that one can hope.
Yeah, this one is from Samshvi Holi. What do they track in cookies policy? What information if we accept those policies when we open in PC and in smartphones? Can you throw some light on that? Why do not all governments make mandatory?
This is not open source again.
Yeah, to utilize essential cookies exclusively to have security, privacy of users. So
it's nothing
it's a
to do
cookie
with
policy.
Yeah. Okay. But since it was asked, I'll quickly answer that. There's an EU regulation that says that websites that use cookies, bits of information stored on your browser, should make it explicit to the user why they are setting the cookie. Is it for tracking the user? Is it for remembering preferences? That's it. It's a bit of information that's stored in the browser, can be used for many things. The cookie policy forces the websites to tell the user what it's being used for. That's the dialog box that you see. That's the gist of it. But yeah, nothing to do with open source or even software.
Okay, there are 3 other open source questions actually. There's one from Narit Bishwas asking, Ken is a student, I think. Can open source engagement provide exhaustive opportunity to undergrad freshers in tech jobs than doing the usual DSA interviews? If yes, which category of companies based on goals?
Let me quickly take this. Is that as a fresher, if you're thinking of contributing, I mean, it's not, because when you say like I said, open source projects are very competitive. They are very high quality. I mean, and there are 100 million repositories on GitHub. You can go and post anything you want. It doesn't matter. But if you want to contribute to the good projects, you have to be very good to do that. I mean, and that won't happen if you're just a student without too much experience. It will take you 3 to 4 years to become to come to a level where you could actually contribute. So if you're starting, you have to start early. And yeah, it's always good to have this aspiration to contribute into some open source project. But I mean, the bar in most good projects is very high to contribute. I mean,
basically UG, PG, none of these things matter. If you want to get a software job, become a software developer first. And the only way to become that, like all of us have said, is to learn to code, practice, gain make and break production experience. There are no shortcuts. UG, PG, they're completely irrelevant.
Okay. Shilpa, there's some other interesting questions.
Yeah. This question is from Ankur Chaudhary. FOSS players are well established. They get into the market and they move towards the proprietary model. What do our speakers think about it?
That's an interesting question. I think Rushabh.
Do you at all feel the urge, Rushabh or Vinay, to go proprietary?
I think if you go by the license, so once if you make something open source, you cannot convert it directly to the proprietary. Means you can launch a new version, but the old version will be open source, always available. So once it is open source, it is open source. Point one. But definitely some company is able to figure out and some way around. But means the open source have different models, and the open source means the freedom is of different level. The one is that you have a source code available. The second is that you can change the source code. The third is that you can distribute the source code. So there is 3 level of freedom they provide open source by default. Sometimes it happens that some company stops some form of like some companies say, okay, you cannot customize the code, but you can have you can view the code. So these kind of changes may happen, but even if some company is doing that, their older version will stay open source. They cannot completely change that, and it's a very complicated process, because when let's say 1,000 developer contributed to that project. And now if you want to change the license, you need to take permission from all these 1,000. So it's a complicated process. So by default, theoretically, it is not very much possible, but yeah, practically it happened. And
But
because
what creates a pressure to go proprietary at some point?
Yeah, sometimes means we need to categorize software into different things. There one is the backend software, open source completely capture the market. In the business application software, especially like the ERPNext category or other kind of business application market, sometimes it is not possible to provide this on a free base or sometimes and this kind of model. So sometimes they go for the propriety, or even when they try to get the investment. I have a few examples like this, when they try to get a more and more investment. So traditional investor asks for what is the IP, anyone can copy this and this kind of. So to save and to answer that kind of question, companies sometimes go for this kind of activities.
So the whole movement that you've seen in the last few years is this cloud computing, where you have
cloud computing,
AWS and everything. So you have Amazon AWS giving open source, pre-packaged open source on their cloud. And essentially what it means is that Amazon makes money from open source. And the open source companies themselves often don't get to make the money. And there has been very public battles now, especially MongoDB and Elastic have been very vocal about Amazon and both of them went public. So, there is a lot of earning pressure on these open source projects, and now Amazon, and the money will ultimately be made by whoever runs the cloud, essentially. And these companies try to fight this this model where they restrict the license. There are a lot of new licenses that have been coming out of late, which restrict this kind of usage by a third party. So you could use it if you want to use it, but if you want to give it as a service, then you have to buy a certain license. And so there is a lot of economics that is also going around it. And it's complicated. I think it is just making things difficult for people to adopt, because now they have to worry about so many different things if they have to adopt open source. I mean, the traditional licenses are very well known. So, there are, that's a separate topic in itself, but there are a lot of traditional licenses which people know how to handle them and how to behave them. And the newer ones, I think people will try and figure this out. But I think underlying, there is a lot of venture investment that has gone into open source projects, and there is a lot of pressure to monetize, and also cloud computing taking away a lot of the chunk.
Are you under any pressure at all, Rushabh, personally?
No, we are also building our own cloud. So that is our, it helps to, I think it's helped us to clarify. So we've launched something called Frappe Cloud, which is essentially, we are thinking that is going to be our future revenue earner. Is that if we can make, end of the day, you have to, because we do believe in the open source model. We don't want to get into these restrictive licenses or unrestrictive, depending on whatever you want to call it. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really a matter of, often it's investor pressure. And why, like I said earlier, that we are in the thick of FOSS. The FOSS future is already here. But when it comes to funding in FOSS versus traditional models, that is still evolving. I think the whole funding for FOSS funding is a huge global debate right now, and we'll probably see more mature financial models evolve over the coming few years. And that will really answer this question of FOSS versus, why do certain FOSS projects, why are they compelled to turn proprietary? Yeah.
Okay.
This question is from Kenneth Sequeira. In the future, is the future of FOSS in India bright? Rain Matter, Zerodha's investments in Frappe, and Happiest Minds acquisition of OSS Cube aside, there is no major investment in FOSS from India itself. Chatroot is an open source project that got funded from Y Combinator. How should Indian business companies push FOSS?
Okay, we discussed that a lot. But yeah,
this Hasura is a FOSS project out of India. It's a developer, it's one of those technical projects, but they've raised significant amounts of VC funding. So I think FOSS funding in India is only really going to go up, and it might just soon explode. And the moment there is funding, we'll automatically start seeing a lot of FOSS projects also emerge. It's always the whole industry thing. So consumption of FOSS, like again, we've discussed several times, it grows exponentially year after year in all sorts of enterprises, be it large IT service companies, small companies, everywhere. Now, at a certain tipping point when everybody is pretty much only consuming FOSS, and we're very close to that, naturally there'll be funding that will flow into producing FOSS also. If everybody is consuming FOSS, at some point, naturally they'll also be forced to get involved. So the future of FOSS, commercial FOSS in India, I think we are starting to see really big signs of that about to kick off. And I think that if funding, of course, continues, we'll start seeing a lot of commercial FOSS projects and funding emerge in India. And it's a catch-22. The moment there's funding, there'll be FOSS projects too to capture that funding.
But globally, how do the VCs view FOSS?
I think globally, there are, so Rushabh mentioned Mongo. They are a listed company. There are tons of really big listed FOSS companies, humongous amounts of money that has VC dollars that have flown into pure FOSS companies. So the whole awareness, investor awareness and awareness of value in FOSS, that's already, I think, mature globally, and it's starting to show its signs in India. So globally, I think everybody gets it. The big VC investor crowd, they get it.
Okay. Shilpa, we are kind of out of time, but are you all okay? I mean, there are a lot of questions. We won't ask all of them, but are you okay with time? Anybody in a rush to leave?
I'm okay to do a few more minutes if.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Rushabh?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah, Shilpa, anything interesting?
Yeah, this question is from Vipin Sahu. Most of the cloud is hosted outside India. How come the FOSS ecosystem can help in data localization, especially during scale?
Yeah, not a
So
well
scalability. Yeah, scalability, I think. Yeah.
I think we covered this earlier. Nothing really to do with cloud. There are all big cloud providers have local data centers in India. That's a different matter. But if you use FOSS, you control and own all the data, everything, all the sensitive stuff within your infrastructure. So that's how FOSS enables data localization. You get to control it within your infrastructure, wherever you host that. Yeah.
Even I want to add that lots of data centers are now opening in India, and lots of Indian companies is doing it. So ultimately, India will see the data center revolution also. Even government is very much aggressive for it, because government wants that every big company should have data in India. So government is even making lots of dedicated corridor kind of thing, or dedicated space kind of thing for data centers. Even we have some space in the Gurgaon area. So there are multiple initiatives from the government also. So definitely there will be lots and lots of data center, and Indian company will be in this place. So there's both things, as Kailash is saying, like every big company, like even Amazon have a center in the Mumbai. So every big company will have their center in India, but Indian company will also do this thing, and they have big data centers.
Okay, we'll make this the last question, Shilpa. The Saurabh Datta asking it. Even the hiring scenarios today is getting changed, as most companies are hiring directly looking from candidate GitHub repo, or if they have contributed to any open source project to know more about their code quality. What are your thoughts on that? These GitHub recos and all, I mean, those are very valuable now, is it?
I want to add one point here. That point one is, yes, you if you have a GitHub repo, it's a very good thing, and it will help. But don't make your GitHub profile for the sake of interview only, because even I have seen the people come with the 73 repos, and all of them are like fake. So
really,
don't try to do that, because it's a very transparent, and the interviewer definitely catch in within few minutes. But if you can do it organically by your knowledge, you should do it. You definitely do it.
Yeah, it's valuable because, be it GitHub or not, how do you prove that you're a good software developer? Showing the software you made is the best way to do it. And the best way to showcase the software you made is to make free and open source software, FOSS. Now, if you make FOSS, GitHub is one of those places where you can host it, but it could be a website, could be anywhere. So the key here is not really GitHub. The key here is, if you want to get hired as a software developer, if you can showcase the software you built proving your software development skills, of course, that has immense value. And GitHub is just a tool to showcase your work.
Okay. Hey, fantastic. I can't recollect the last time, Shilpa, that we got so many questions. So obviously something is brewing.
Yeah.
Maybe the mainstream media can now start focusing on FOSS.
Yeah, one of my colleagues, I think, wrote about a year ago. I think we should do more. Yeah.
You guys should do a lot more. And
Lot more,
that will
okay.
drive the industry change.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you so much, Vinay, Kailash, Rushabh. A very fascinating discussion. And like in China, suddenly, like you said, Kailash, 5 years ago, just took off. Maybe we are at getting to that moment where the open source movement will take off. So thanks a lot. It was a great discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sujit, for doing this.
Thanks.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for having
much.
us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.